Today we have a green-yellow law deck profile. This is the deck I've been playing the most from set 10 to set 11. By far the deck that I've been having the most fun with and truly enjoy. Take a look at this deck profile. Let me know what you guys think. Let me know if you have any questions, and we'll go from there. And let's go ahead and just start off with the leader itself. So for those who don't know, it's a green-yellow combo 4-life leader with 1 Dawn attached. If the cost of your characters on board is 5 or more, you can choose to bounce anything back to hand, reveal the top card of your life. If it's a 5 or less supernova, choose to play it out. Important things to note there right away is A, you can bounce back anything. Freeing up space on your board with this deck is extremely important. It's very easy to get congested with your board and start overplaying your units, which is not what you want to do because this deck's main function is building your hand back immensely because we have access to replaying our searchers so many times. So you want to make sure you have ample board space consistently to play down your searchers, to play down your bodies without having to overcall them. And the second thing is playing a card from life is optional. Sometimes you strictly use the leader skill to get something back to hand and just, you flip over the life through the requirement of the leader skill, but choosing to not play it out sometimes is extremely important, even if you have the opportunity to, because you don't necessarily want to go down in life too quickly. You really need to pick and choose when you're going to play something out of life in order to make sure that your opponent can't just blitz you out of the game. This leader is extremely fun, but very combo oriented. So just be careful, make sure you learn things properly before you just start blitzing through your life. Now that we've gone over the leader, let's jump into maybe the most important part of the deck, arguably. There's a lot of important parts, but that is our 12 searchers. Because of the new starter decks, we now have access to a full 12 searchers, and I was previously on a list with just 10, but since I went about testing 12 searchers, the level of consistency that's been brought about is really high. You're able to chain into your pieces so much easier, and you don't have to worry about not seeing one of them because they can all search each other pretty much. Luffy can't grab himself, but he can grab the other two. The other two can grab any of them. So your level of consistency really jumps up with that 12. You can make an argument to go down to 11, which if you do, you would cut 1 kid killer and then put in whatever one space that you want to fill up. But I highly suggest running 12 because the level of consistency is just that great. And these are, in my opinion, laid out in order of best to worst. Not meaning this is a bad searcher, it's just the worst of the 3. The reason Luffy is the best is because it is a 1-drop, so it is the cheapest to play out of these. Yes, Bonnie is also 1-drop, but she has to tap 1 to rest herself in order to search. Luffy is strictly a 1-drop, check top 5, grab something. Being able to replay Luffy is your best way to build up your hand, build up your resources, and very often will you want to use up about 1 to 2 Dawns worth to really get value out of your Cavendish in order to just generate even more advantage for you. Bonnie is the second best searcher of the deck. There's been a lot of contention between these two. The reason Bonnie is the second best is 1, it can generate you resources continuously if it stays on board. 2, there's a lot of matchups where you want to use her as a pseudo blocker to absorb in a hit from either an opponent's leader or something that's like an equivalent power to that. So it's great at redirecting pressure from our life to our board because we're a deck that eats our own life. So being able to alleviate some of that pressure towards our board is what we want. And like I said before, having space open on your board is extremely important. If we can redirect an attack to our Bonnie and have her A, soak up a damage we don't need to take, and B, open up a spot on our board, that's just a net positive all around. And the reason we're fine with letting this die is because we have 8 other searchers that we know we can bounce back to our hand whenever we need to through leader skill. And the reason that Kid Killer is the worst of the bunch is because it's strictly a worse Luffy. The reason being, it's 2 costs and not 1 cost. Yes, there are very good times where you have 2 open Dawn to do it, but if you can play 2 Luffys instead of just 1 Kid Killer, you would 90% of the time want to do that unless your board is like way too clogged. The secondary skill for Kid Killer doesn't come up for me because of how I've chosen to build my deck. There are a couple good Supernova 1-cost events that you can put into the deck. So if you run them, yes, you can have the potential for the secondary effect being live. For those who don't know, it's when your opponent attacks, you can trash the character and set up to 1 Dawn card active. It's nice, but I don't have space currently in my list for those 1 Dawn events. There's very few tech spots in this deck. Like everything is pretty core. Maybe you have like 3 to 5 different spots that you could mess with ratios wise. But the nice thing is you can always mind game your opponent. You can use a skill to trash itself. A, opening up a spot on your board. B, you're setting up a Dawn active, and your opponent will have to potentially play around that counter event that you could be bluffing or you actually have because you decide to run it. But aside from that, these searches are all great. Luffy and Bonnie, great to play out on 1 Dawn, aka your first turn, because you want to go first with this deck in 95% of your matchups. If you have both of these in hand, I would suggest playing Bonnie first because you'll go into your next turn drawing 1 card before you do a search. That way you're essentially going 1 card deeper into your deck before you have to choose what you want to pick out. So you can go Bonnie on 1 Dawn, next turn you draw a card, Bonnie search, find something, play Luffy, you can find something else. Just a really good way to just start digging. That's pretty much 11 cards deep through your deck, by your second turn. So you can pick up your pieces that you need very easily. And if you're going second, seeing both of these on your 2-Don, great. Seeing just this on your 2-Don, great. You have a lot of options that you can go with the deck. And because these can all pretty much pick each other out of the deck, you're going to be comboing and chaining into so many things that your resources will feel really good, really consistent. Moving away from the searchers, we are going to go into the second core of the deck. Like I said, this whole deck is pretty much one giant core, but everything just seems into each other that it's there's a couple different cores, you could say. So we have here our 5 drops of the deck, pretty much the bread and butter that gets a lot of the different pieces that we need to stall our opponent or generate ourselves more advantage and go about it that way. Cavendish is by far the most important out of these 4 different 5 drops because being able to establish it early, generate us more advantage as it stays on the board because it restands 2-Don on play and on attack. It's a good way to get our searchers on board, get a quick 2-Don used, get some more cards to hand, or play, some of our blockers out, build up some defense, still restand our 2-Don so we can go about playing our curve normally. Blocker Law and Bonnie, pretty much 2A, 2B, I would say interchangeable in terms of importance. They do different things, but also a little bit of the same to an extent. Blocker Law is great for bouncing anything back to our hand and replaying something that's 3 or less, so we can either play out some more searches, get some more resources to hand, or play out a blocker to redirect attacks from our Cavendish, from our life, whatever it may be that we need to stall out from. Also, with the new Bege that came out in set 11, great way to just cheat it out on board for pretty much free and protect everything that we have at that moment. That's really important because our opponent, regardless of what the deck is, mainly if it revolves around effects, will want to get rid of our board, especially our Cavendish, as soon as possible. 90% of the time you're countering out, maybe even blocking, it's probably going to be to protect Cavendish unless you're really low at life and your opponent's going for your life. Probably have to do that too. But Cavendish is so important. Blocker Law is great at supporting Cavendish to protect it, protect our life. Really, really good. Bonnie is also extremely important because she can throw off our opponent's natural curve very effectively. If we look at blue-purple Luffy, for example, if they're going into a 10-Don turn, we can stun one of the Don to make it so that if they 9-drop, they can't leave a Don up for Giant. Being able to stop that from happening greatly lowers that deck's defensive ability a ton because they won't be able to cycle with Giant, or they won't be able to just get a free one card 3K with Gear 2. Stunning that Don sometimes is even more important than stunning one of their big bodies. But the nice thing with Bonnie is she can sort of function as a blocker as well, and technically a better blocker. If they have a 9-drop Luffy on board, for example, and you go ahead and stun that, it's essentially doing the same thing as if you played a Blocker Law that would just absorb the attack and die. Bonnie instead stuns that card from being able to attack, and she still sticks around on the board, being able to swing into our opponent the following turn. So that's why I said there's some similarities here and there in terms of the defensive options. Being able to stun a character or a Don, extremely important. Against a lot of decks that have, if we're forced to go second, which sometimes we are because, we lose die rolls, then being able to cheat out Bonnie on our 4-Don turn can throw off our opponent's 5-Don turn and sometimes just win us the game from there because of how much advantage we'll be getting before they can really get things going. Some key examples there would be green-purple Luffy. They can't play Sanji Pudding anymore, or against Buggy, they can't go double wide anymore, and they're going to be a turn behind us. Cavendish is also a great option to play out on 4-Don because it just restands 2-Don immediately. We can go into a blocker Bege or immediately get some more resource advantage through replaying some of our searchers. Law is probably the worst of those 4-Don plays. Really, this Law is the worst of the 4-Don plays, but the real worst of the 4-Don plays is going to be Law, just because he doesn't generate us as much advantage or tempo that we would get if compared to playing the other two. Now, going into Restand Law. This card is very good in very specific moments. I've seen a lot of lists either run 0, I've seen some run 2. I've decided to go for 1. 1 I think is fine because you run 12 searchers, so you can cycle through your deck very easily. And if it does come up in a search and you're in a position where you can take it, well, there you go. You got it for the rest of the game. If not, there are a fair amount of times where you can just cycle back through your deck to eventually grab it again if you need to. For those who don't know, this Law is considered Restand Law. It can restand any of your 5 or less Supernovas. So if you're swinging, for example, really big with one of these guys and you need to play it to restand to get an additional attack, you can do that. And because our leader can cheat out characters out of life for cheap, this card is even better in this deck than it would be in other decks. I think better than Red-Green Law to an extent. So the reason it's at 1 is because it won't come up all the time, but in some matchups where you need to get that second big swing, it can be pretty helpful. Now that we've got the core 5 cost for the deck over with, let's go ahead and jump into the newest addition from set 11. And Honestly, very much needed addition. It is the 2-cost Bege. So not only is this a chump blocker, but it has a once per turn effect that if any of our supernova type characters with, there's no cost restriction on it, were to be removed from the field by an opponent's effect, we can go ahead and take that character, put it to the top of our life face down. And this does protect multiple characters at once. For example, 4-cost Lucci that removes 2 things at once. We can choose the 2 characters and the order that they go back on top and protect them that way. This card is essential in stopping our opponent from slowing us down, because next turn we can just use leader skill and essentially get that card or whichever one that we want to get out, depending on the order we put them back in, very cheap, and then still continue the rest of our game plan. So in the case where opponents often target the Cavendish early to remove it, even if we use the protection effect and it goes to life, we'll still be able to use the Cavendish next turn and get out its true value of restanding 2 Dawn very easily. So this card is very, very good at helping us not lose tempo that we normally would. Plus, it's a cheap chump blocker as well. It helps reduce some of the early pressure that we can face, or even protect some of our board if we need to. Just be careful, because a lot of opponents, they'll either try to target this Bege itself right away, since it can be targeted, it just protects everything else besides itself, or they'll start swinging their attacks in a way where they're trying to bait us into blocking this off the board early, and then use the remainder of their Dawn for whatever removal effects they have for our board. Just something to make note of. Really quick tip in terms of a play that you can do, assuming that you have one character already established on board going to your 5 Dawn turn, you can play Cavendish, play 1-cost Bege, put Blocker Law into life, and then shambles out with your leader skill and Blocker Law to play a Bege out as well. So your board will be Cavendish, Law, and 2-cost Bege, essentially having 2 5-cost units and protection on board. The chances that your board is going to be able to be interacted with, at least to an extremely detrimental way, next turn is very low. And from there, you just have so much momentum through this protection effect and defense if you need it, that you're just in a really good spot. Now that we've touched base on the newest addition from OP11 in this Bege, let's go ahead and touch on the 2 of the core cards when it comes to your life manipulation to really cheat out your 5-cost bodies in the early/mid game. And that comes in the way of 1-cost 2K Bege and 3-cost Blocker Bonnie. Very similar cards. They have a slight difference in their text, but they both read to begin with, you may add the top card or the bottom card of your life to your hand, and then Bege can put back any supernova to the top of your life face up, and then Bonnie has to put a 5-cost unit specifically to the top of your life face up. Very nice cards. The most often time that you use Bege is if you're going first on your 5 Dawn turn, assuming you have Cavendish, you can play Cavendish, play Bege, and then put a 5-cost into your life, use leader skill to bounce Bege back to your hand, and then play out whatever 5-cost that you put in. Depending on which one you played, you can do some stuff from there. And then Bonnie's main point is if you're going second, assuming you played on your 2 Dawn turn either 2 1-cost or 1 2-cost unit, you can play Bonnie for 3, put a 5-cost into your life, attach 1 Dawn to lead, and then bounce back your other unit to your hand, because this is a blocker, so we'll want to keep this on board. And then you can play out that 5-cost on your 4 Dawn turn and still swing 6. So really good tempo play to get some really early advantage on your opponent. Now you can technically do the same thing with Bege on your 4 Dawn turn as well. Assuming that you met the either 2 1-cost or 1 2-cost requirement on your first turn, you can then go another 2-cost or 2 more 1-cost units and then play Bege. That way you'll meet your total 5-cost requirement and then still cheat out a 5-drop character on that turn. Sometimes it's a little bit nicer because instead of establishing the defense with Bonnie, you'll most likely be playing more searchers, so you're just getting more pieces for your later turns that'll be coming up. Those are the 2 earliest ways that you can go about shambling in this deck: on your 5 Dawn with Cavendish, and then on your 4 Dawn with a 2-drop, and then some other units, and then Bonnie specifically will meet that requirement. So really nice. In the late game, they don't come up too much. Bege can come up in the late game if you combo it with 8-drop Kid, where you can either play this out or cheat it out with Kid and then do some life manipulation, put a 5-drop into life. If you have the extra Dawn up for lead, then you can use leader skill and then still bounce this back to hand and play out the 5-drop as you still have the 8-cost Kid on board. So it helps you either depending on which 5-drop you put in, can do some really nice combo plays that normally you wouldn't be able to do with 8-drop Kid, but this deck can do because it has this card in particular, or Bonnie for that example. Because 8-drop Kid can also cheat out the Blocker Bonnie, which sometimes could be nicer if you have a different target to bounce back to hand through leader skill. But these 2 cards, really, really good value. As of right now, there's no real reason to go below 8 on these, just because they're so integral to the the core mechanics of the deck itself. So definitely something to pay attention to. And 9 times out of 10, if I'm doing early searching and I want to make sure I'm set up for the late game, I'll probably prioritize grabbing Bege over Bonnie if I do need a way to filter between my life. Because even late game, sometimes with either of these 2, you can take your life in case that it's like let's say it's like a 2K Zeus. You can take your life and then put a 5-cost into life that A, you're trying to set up, or B, you just don't need right now, but you need the 2K counter instead. Just kind of lets you, almost filter your hand to an extent as well. Something to make note of. But yeah, that's these 2 units, pretty much the core of the life manipulation that we got. And we'll jump into next kind of the third round out of how to manipulate our life. Next up, moving away from these cards here, we do have kind of the top end of the deck, mainly in 7-drop Law, 8-drop Kid, and then 7-drop Hody Jones. Now, all of these cards are pretty important, but they obviously serve very different functions. Law is pretty much the last of the sort of life manipulator cards that we just went over. If you aren't familiar with it, on play, reveal up to one supernova from your hand, put it into your life face down, and then give your leader a rested Dawn card. Pretty much helps us play this on curve on 7 Dawn and then still meet the Dawn requirement with our leader to then play out the unit that we just put in ideally. Most of the time, you'll probably put in, assuming you have a Cavendish already set up, you'll probably go for the Blocker Law or the Bonnie on your 7 Dawn turn, and then cheat that out to either establish defenses or, the Bonnie to slow down your opponent in whichever way you decide to do. So this card is extremely important to your deck. There's a lot of games where if you don't see this card on curve, it really slows you down a lot, because it just puts you so far ahead of where your opponents would be if you are able to play it on curve. This card is extremely important. I run it at a 4. I've seen some lists at 3. I just feel like 3 is a little risky because I know I need to see this card on curve and how important it is. I prefer to have it at 4. You can try it at 3 if you want. I think 4 is the way to go. Just really up the consistency of the deck overall. 8-drop Kid right now is a 1 of. Part of me wants to go to a 2 of. The reason behind 8-drop Kid is because in the aggro matchups such as Zoro and Bello Betty, and some of the green matchup slash, Ploofy, green-purple Luffy matchups, seeing 8-drop Kid is really nice because a lot of those aggro matchups slash purple Luffy, green-purple Luffy don't have a great way to deal with this kid. Yeah, some of them, they do have access to Gamma Knife or the Mole Gun or Power Reducers, but we do have enough defense through our other cards to help kind of stall and mitigate that. So that's why we run 8-drop Kid to still have that 8-wall option. The reason I'm thinking of going up to 2 is because we do run 12 searchers, so there's oftentimes that we can find it pretty quickly. The only issue is that I've come across, oftentimes when I'm doing those searches, I am trying to find a specific piece, and if 8-drop Kid comes up in those search where I'm finding something, I'll often just have to bottom deck it. And yes, we can cycle through our deck very consistently, but I pretty much know, for the most part, it's not going to be an option I'm going to have available for the rest of the game. I don't quite like that feeling, because there are times where an 8-drop Kid in certain scenarios can just stall out for a turn enough for you to close out in the next turn. 8-drop Kid and Hody Jones have really nice synergy because you can just go down to 0 life if you know you have 8-drop Kid and then just play off of this, and then you can just Hody Jones effectively thereafter, repeatedly, because you don't even have to worry about taking your own life because you have a kid on board. Plus, you're probably going to be at 0 life anyways. So the combo between these two is really nice, and the shambles potential with the leader, just regenerating resources with 8-drop Kid on board. Like I said, you could do the plays with a 1-cost Bege. You can even cheat out, your searchers for free off of your initial play of Kid. Just really nice. So I'm trying to think of going up to 2. Just space is really tight with this deck, so I'm not 100% sure. Now, Hody Jones, this card is really, really important to the deck. I've seen some lists go on to 4, and then some lists on 3 of this. I'm on the reverse because quite often I do think I see this at 3 enough times to where most of the times I see 1 of this card, I'll always see the second really soon. But if I don't see any for the game, I won't see any for the game. I know that's sounds a little redundant, but I don't know how else to say it. If I see 1, I'll see the other 2 as well. If I see 0, I'm going to see 0. I won't just draw into it. But this card is very important, especially in this meta, for closing out games specifically, and then also dealing with our opponent's boards in the aggro matchups. Because against any of the purple Luffy variants, being able to rest their blockers as well as their Dawn, extremely important to help us close out games, because we want to have Cavendish on board already, play Hody Jones, get additional Dawn, and then just go for gain from there, because they won't have access to Giant, or, 8-cost Curry blockers, or, whatever other blockers come up. And against the aggro matchups, it's very nice to just help us clear their board and just alleviate the pressure that we would normally feel. Oftentimes in the aggro match, we won't want to use our leader skill as freely as the other matchups, so we'll usually counter out pretty early, have a high life count, and then play Hody Jones to then take our life, get a card to hand, but most importantly, clear our opponent's board in the process of doing so. This card is extremely important. If you want to go up to 4, I can't really blame you. It's a really good card. If you want to see that consistently, totally makes sense. Very important in the Teach matchup and the Bonnie matchup, because against Teach, the rush isn't part of the on play, so you're pretty much getting the rush without having to take the drawback of taking a life. Very important card. Pretty much have to hard mulligan for this card in the Teach matchup. Bonnie matchup, you could argue you kind of have to hard mulligan for it, because I would really like to see this card so I don't have to worry about Bonnie's leader skill. So overall, Hody is extremely important to the deck. Could go 4 copies. I wouldn't go less than 3 because you do need to see it. Could go up to 2 of this, just a matter of finding space. Not too sure. You could go down to 3 of this, but like I said, I really want to see 7-drop Law because it's literally an equivalent to a Luffy Taro, because you're playing out a 5 cost as well, and you're also getting a 6k leader swing. Just it generates a lot of advantage and aggression through establishing a 7 cost 9k and a 5 cost 6k in the same turn. Just really strong. that's pretty much the top end. There's some flexibility, like I said, but you'll have to kind of mix and match the different ratios that you want to go for your deck. We've gone over the top end for the deck. The only thing that we have left to go over is the additional 2Ks for the deck. And that comes in 3 of the new 2-cost Zeus and 2 of the 1-cost EB Scratch Manipulator. In total, I'm running 9 2Ks for this deck. I've seen a lot of lists at 8. I've seen a lot of lists at 10. I more or less decided to go right in the middle at 9 because 8 feels a little scary with how many 6K bodies as well as leaders are in this meta. Green Purple Luffy, essentially a 6K leader. Blue Purple Luffy, a 6K leader. Just a little risky to go down to 8. Yeah, I know we obviously have searchable 2Ks in this deck and we have a lot of searches, but most of the time I'm only trying to grab 2Ks in the late game because I really need to see my pieces early. I feel like 9 is nice because I'll see them consistently enough, where 10 I might see, one of those cards that I need to open up a space for, such as Restand Law. It's one of, if I'm not running Restand Law, that's probably going to be my 10th 2K if I really have to pick and choose. But let's go into why specifically these choices. New 2-cost Zeus is really nice to deal with aggro matchups and then pesky 5 costs that are prevalent right now in the meta. Against Bello Betty and Zoro, this card's really nice because assuming you have a Cavendish on board, let's play out a 6-Don turn, for example. You can play this card for 2, assuming you have a Cavendish on board, take a life, pop one of your opponent's units, and then swing with Cavendish at one of your opponent's rested units, restand the 2-Don, and still have 6-Don for the rest of the turn. Play 5-cost Law, bounce Zeus back to hand, replay Zeus, deal with another one of your opponent's units. Yes, I know you're taking 2 life in that instance, but we have a blocker on board, and when dealing with those aggro matchups that don't have access to unblockable, keep that in mind. It's really nice to slow down their aggression and just help us clear the board so then we can just start going for their life. The reason for Scratch Manipulator is there's a fair amount of chump blockers in this meta, 2 costs and below, because his skill, he can rest a 2 cost or less unit. It helps us clear chump blockers very easily. You just play it, and if your opponent has 2 of them, you play this, leader skill, bounce back to hand, replay it. You just spent 2 Don to deal with 2 blockers. That's crazy value right there. Plus, it's also searchable, which is really nice. And in the mirror match, which hopefully you won't have to play too often, but this deck is really cool, so maybe you will. This card is extremely important in the mirror match because it taps your opponent's searchers as well as Bege, allowing you to clear your opponent's searchers, which if you play the deck, are extremely important, and your Bege, which if you play the deck, also extremely important. This card's really good in the mirror. I could see myself going 3 of this and 2 of this, but the removal aspect of Zeus is really nice. So I think I probably will keep this at it for now. And the other thing to make note of is Bello Betty specifically. You really need to see this card in that matchup. That way you can tap their Bello Betty searchers and their Kumas early, and then use your leader to swing into those in the early game. So that way you don't have to worry about, those random 5K attacks coming at you because they will swing at you. So this card is essentially taking care of one of those attacks for you. Very, very important. This is searchable. This isn't searchable, but there's enough filter in the deck that you'll likely draw into at least one throughout the course of the game. And if it's a matchup where you need to use the on play, you have the option of doing so. Some other notable 5 costs to maybe take care of with this card is against Green Purple. If they don't have the stage established, it lets you take care of Sanji and Pudding really easily. Against Blue Purple Luffy, you can deal with 5 cost Nami blockers really easily. Obviously in the mirror as well, it lets you target your opponent's 5 costs. You got Cavendish, Law, Bonnie. Against Green Bonnie, it also lets you target the Smoker. I guess that also goes for Red Green Smoker as well, which is normally a bad matchup for you. But it lets you target the Cavendish in Bonnie, Smoker in Bonnie, Smoker in Red Green Smoker, and it's just really nice removal. You don't mind going down into that life, too low if you are using Zeus because you're removing an opponent's threat, and you have enough blockers and defense naturally with the deck, as well as life regeneration with Law. You don't have to play the card out that you put into life with Law. You can just leave it there to heal. So I think Zeus is a really good inclusion. You could cut 1 Zeus and go down to 8 2Ks and then play maybe a second kid or a second restand depending on what you want to do. I think 8 is pretty low, but I have seen some lists in particular see a lot of success with it. I just think it's a little risky. If you want to go that route, you can. In terms of additional 2Ks that you can consider running, I was on a list for a little bit where I was running 2 Zeus, 2 Scratch Manipoo, and then 1 of the new X-Drake from the Bonnie starter deck. That's a 5 cost. Essentially, that card is on play. You can rest one of your opponent's 5 cost or less units. Not the KO, but sometimes being able to rest one of your opponent's blockers if they have protection on it for whatever reason. You could go that route because you can also cheat that card out for really cheap with leader skill. But it didn't come up for me enough, and I would rather have the actual removal value of the Zeus instead. Just something to make note of as a kind of an honorable mention. But that is pretty much the deck list in totality from there. We went over our searchers, our 5 drops, Bege, life manipulators, top end, and our 2Ks. I think this deck is in a really strong position in this meta. I was playing it previously, so like I said, I do have a lot of experience with this deck. I understand the matchup spread pretty well. I think right now in this meta, there's only one matchup where you want to go second, and that's Bege. The reason for that is because you can take them off of their 4-cost Ivankov into Karasu into 5-cost Ivankov into Karasu curve, just to slow them down a little bit. I think anybody who's played against Bege knows that if they see their curve, specifically that kind of curve, it doesn't really matter what deck you are, you'll probably just die to it because it's so aggressive. There's no way you can just counter out of that many 8k 9k swings that early and that consistently without having any of your boards set up. So Bege you definitely want second for sure. Every other matchup that I've played, green purple Luffy, blue purple Luffy, the mirror, Zoro, you could argue you want to go second as well. That way you can just start swinging into their own attackers. Teach, you want to go first because you just need to see Hody Jones on your 7-on curve. Just having that rush on curve is really important. I would say like 95% of the matchups, you just want to go first. Bonnie, you want to go first as well. Green Smoker or Red Green Smoker, you want to go first. Just keep up the pressure with your 7-drop law, essentially going first. Like I said, it's a Luffy Taro. Seeing Luffy Taro, if anyone's ever played against Luffy or played Luffy, just very impactful 7-on turn. This is effectively the same thing. I think this deck, it's a ton of fun, but the learning curve is very high. It's very easy to mess up with this deck, mainly in the ways of cheating your life too quickly. You have to be careful that you're not doing it at inconvenient times where your opponent can just math you out the game because you went down in life too early. You don't have enough defense through hand or through blockers to soak up enough hits. So you really have to make sure that you're doing things calculatively, kind of taking your time with it. Also, making sure that the pieces you're grabbing off your searchers are what you actually need to get. There is a couple times in recent games where I've gotten a little greedy with my searches because I just kind of hoped that I would either draw into it or off my other search, I'll find a piece I need. For example, there was one time where I did a 1-drop Bonnie search and I didn't have Beige or Luffy in hand, but I had all the other pieces to hit my 5-don turn that I needed already, just not the Beige. I decided to go for the Luffy to then play it out to get another search to hope to find a Beige when I should have just grabbed the Beige and I would have been in such a good spot. Just little things like that to make sure that you are grabbing pieces that you need in accordance, and also remembering how many times you search with this deck. Keeping track of your searches and what you're bot decking is extremely important because, like I said, you can cycle through your deck very easily. And knowing how many searches you've done and what order you're putting your cards back into deck will let you figure out how many cards deep you need to search to be able to find a piece that you might be needing. In the case of 8-drop Kid, for example, if it comes up in an early search, maybe even turn 1, you know that it's now at the bottom of your deck. You probably need to do about, what is that, like 7, probably like 7 to 8 searches, through drawing, for the rest of your turns and whatnot, probably like 7 to 8 searches to make sure that it rises back up to the top so that when you need it, you'll be able to search it out from that point. But this deck has a lot of technical applications. I also don't think a lot of people have tested against this right now. They probably will because this deck is on the rise, but it's a ton of fun. So let me know what you guys think. It's a deck I would recommend to anybody who likes combo-oriented gameplay. I don't think there's too many true combo decks in One Piece. I would say like Red Green Law, this deck, maybe Sakazuki to an extent, Red Purple Law, OG Red Purple Law. Those are kind of the true combo decks. So this deck is a ton of fun, hard to learn, like I said, but I plan on having a gameplay video coming out. Previously, I did a Gecko Moria deck profile and then kind of like a gauntlet gameplay video afterwards. I plan on doing that with this deck, showcasing really the big 4 matchups I think people can expect. Blue Purple Luffy, Green Purple Luffy, Bege, and then probably like one more that whatever pops up. So expect that. That should be coming probably tomorrow if I had to guess. Just gotta get those recorded, edit them up, and we'll be good to go. If you guys have any questions about the list, maybe your own interpretations of the list, what you might add here and there, like I said, there's some flexible spots, not too many because space is really tight with this deck list because so many cards are such a core function. But yeah, let me know what you guys think. Let me know how you enjoy playing it. If you need any tips or advice, feel free to drop them in the comments as well. Other than that, I'll catch y'all later. Peace.